The words just hung there, thick and heavy in the sterile air of my boss's office. "You're too smart for this job." It wasn't a compliment, and I knew it instantly. It was the way he said it, with a slight, almost invisible smirk, leaning back in his $1,000 ergonomic chair as if he were a king on a throne. Coming from him, Mark, a man who I was beginning to realize saw my skin color before he ever saw my qualifications, it was a dismissal. It was like being praised for being a racehorse while being told you'd only ever be allowed to pull a plow. It was a verbal pat on the head, a subtle reminder of where he thought my place was. He was smiling, but his eyes were cold. This wasn't encouragement. This was a warning. He thought he was putting a cap on my ambition, trying to gently, paternalistically, put me back in a box he'd built for me in his mind. He had no idea he had just handed me all the motivation I would ever need to expose the rot at the heart of his department. And right there, with my heart pounding a furious, frantic rhythm against my ribs, I knew exactly how I was going to do it. It's wild how 9 little words can blow up your whole world. "You're too smart for this job." That's all it took to shatter the fragile peace I'd meticulously built over 3 years at a company I genuinely wanted to believe in. Before that moment, my story was the kind they put in recruitment brochures. I was James, the kid who graduated with honors in data science and landed a coveted analyst position at a major tech firm right out of college. I was hungry and I was grateful. I didn't just put in the hours. I lived and breathed the work. I not only met my targets but exceeded them by a wide margin. I was the go-to guy for the really complex data problems, the one who could take a chaotic, million-row spreadsheet and make it sing a coherent, profitable song. In my first year alone, I automated a manual reporting process that was eating up hundreds of person-hours a month. The project was so successful that it saved the company an estimated $200,000 a year. My name was attached to it, but the credit, I would soon learn, was easily transferred. My performance reviews were flawless, saturated with phrases like exceeds expectations, a natural leader, and invaluable asset. And Mark, my boss, my direct manager, was my biggest fan. On the surface, he was the perfect modern manager. He was charismatic, the kind of guy who remembers your wife's name and asks about your weekend plans, making you feel seen. He was slick, polished, always said the right thing in big meetings, and had a knack for making even the driest quarterly results sound like an epic victory. He'd praise my work publicly, often holding my reports up as the gold standard for the rest of the team. We had a good relationship. I mistook his professional politeness for genuine respect. I saw him as a mentor, someone whose path I could follow. But looking back now with the sting of his words still fresh, the signs were all there. A constellation of little red flags I'd willfully chosen to ignore because I wanted to believe in the dream. Tiny paper cuts to my spirit, like the time he called me so articulate, with a tone of genuine surprise after I presented a complex machine learning model to a client, as if he expected me to communicate in grunts and shrugs, or how he'd consistently give all the high-profile client-facing projects to my white colleagues, even when my data was the bedrock of the entire pitch. I'd build the engine, and they'd get to drive the car in the victory parade. I told myself I was being too sensitive, that the work would speak for itself in the end. I believed in the shiny idea of meritocracy they sold us on during orientation. I was wrong. The corporate world, I was learning with a sickening lurch in my stomach, isn't always about merit. In fact, it often isn't. It's a game, and I had been playing checkers while everyone else was playing chess with a secret rule book I'd never been given. Research from this year, 2025, shows that a staggering 59% of professionals think discrimination is still a significant problem at work. I was on the verge of becoming part of that statistic, but not in the way Mark had anticipated. To truly grasp the full weight of his words, you need to understand the context. Our department was in the pressure cooker. We were in the middle of a massive company-wide strategic project. It was a career maker, the kind of high-stakes initiative that gets you noticed by the C-suite. For months, I was the driving force behind our team's contributions. I'm not exaggerating. I'd been working 14-hour days, sacrificing weekends, building the complex analytical models from scratch, stress testing the data until my eyes burned. and creating the very framework upon which our entire strategy was built. The whole team knew it. My colleagues would come to my desk with questions, not marks. Mark especially knew it. The final presentation to the board was a week away, and Mark was set to lead it. It was his name on the cover slide, his voice that would narrate our projected success. And I was okay with that. That's how the hierarchy works. I was confident that my indispensable role in the project would finally secure the senior analyst, promotion I'd been gunning for, officially for over a year. The conversation that changed everything started innocently enough. He called me into his glass-walled office for a final check-in before the big show. He was beaming, practically glowing with anticipated glory. "James, solid work," he started, waving a hand dismissively at the stack of my printed charts and reports on his desk. "The numbers are tight. The models are bulletproof. The board's gonna love this." I felt a rush of genuine pride. This was my work, my creation. "Thanks, Mark. I think we're in a great spot. The data tells a really compelling story about market penetration." He nodded, but his eyes glazed over the report. He wasn't seeing the data. He was seeing his own reflection in the future applause. Then he leaned forward, steepling his fingers in that classic managerial pose. "You know, I've been thinking about you, about your future here. This was it. The talk I'd been waiting for. The promotion. The next step. The validation." My heart started picking up speed, but this time it was with excitement. "You're a sharp guy, James," he went on, his voice dropping into a tone that was syrupy and paternalistic. "You really are. You get the numbers, you do the work, you don't cause any trouble. You're reliable. Don't cause any trouble." That snagged in my ear, a weird, discordant note in what I thought was a triumphant symphony. But I let it go, eager for the finale. "And that's why I have to be honest," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if he were letting me in on a great secret. "The senior analyst role you're going for, I don't think it's the right fit." The air just vacuumed out of the room. I could feel the blood drain from my face. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "What? Why?" "My performance reviews. The project." He held up a hand, a silencing gesture that was both casual and absolute. "It's not about performance. Your performance is, well, it's fine. It's solid." Suddenly, my exceeds expectations and invaluable asset ratings were just fine. "Then what is it about?" I asked, my voice way tighter and higher than I wanted. He leaned back, letting the silence hang for a moment, enjoying his power. And then he said it. "James, look, you're too smart for this job. You're too smart for the grunt work this department does." I just stared at him, my brain short-circuiting as it tried to process the absurd, illogical statement. It was a compliment wrapped around a cyanide pill. He was praising my intelligence while simultaneously telling me there was no room for it to grow on his team. He was saying, "You're brilliant at this level, where I need you doing the heavy lifting I take credit for. But don't you dare think that brilliance gets you a seat at a bigger table." It was classic gatekeeping, dressed up in the cheap tuxedo of flattery. He wasn't done twisting the knife. "The senior analyst role," he said, gesturing vaguely, "it's more about client engagement, stakeholder management. It's a culture fit thing. You're more of a backroom guy, a numbers wizard. We need you there. That's where you're most valuable. A culture fit. The slimiest excuse in the corporate playbook. It's like a secret password for a club you'll never be invited to join. If you don't know it, it doesn't matter how qualified you are. You're not getting in." He was telling me that my track record, my proven intellect, and my work ethic didn't matter because I just didn't fit in with the homogeneous white faces in the senior roles. The unspoken part was deafening. He saw me as a tool, a brilliant but inanimate cog in his machine, not a future leader. I sat there in a silence that stretched on for what felt like an eternity. The hum of the air conditioning sounding like a roar. I finally found my voice, and it was dangerously calm. "So let me be clear," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "My work is excellent. I'm intelligent. But because I am, as you put it, too smart and not a culture fit, I'm being denied a promotion that I've earned by every single objective metric." Asking him so directly, using his own words against him, seemed to throw him off guard. His practiced smile faltered. "Now, James, don't put words in my mouth. I'm giving you honest career advice here. There's no need to get aggressive. Aggressive. There it was. The other classic racist trope. A black man asks for clarity, and he's aggressive. A white man does it, and he's assertive. In that single instant, every last shred of respect I had for him evaporated into nothing. As I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the floor, I looked him dead in the eye. "Thank you for the feedback, Mark," I said, my voice dripping with an icy control I didn't know I possessed. "It's been illuminating." I walked out of his office, my mind a white-hot storm of anger and humiliation. But underneath it all, a cold, stern resolve was beginning to crystallize. He thought he had shut me down. What he'd actually done was declare war. And I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just going to fight for my promotion. I was going to dismantle the entire rotten system he so comfortably presided over. The first 48 hours were a blur of pure incandescent rage. I went through the motions at work, my face a calm, professional mask, but inside I was replaying that conversation over and over. He had underestimated me completely. He saw a workhorse, not a strategist. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. He used my intelligence as a weapon against me, so I decided to use that same intelligence right back at him. My first thought was to march straight to HR, but I ditched that idea almost as quickly as it came. Going to HR would be like telling a referee that the other team's star player is cheating when that other team is secretly paying the referee. HR is there to protect the company, not the employee. It would be my word against his. They'd launch a performative investigation, and I'd be labeled a troublemaker. No, I needed more than just my word. I needed cold, complex, irrefutable data. The very thing I was a wizard with. It was time to build a case so solid that they'd have no choice but to act. My quiet investigation started that night. I opened a password-protected document and wrote down every single interaction with Mark that had ever felt off, every microaggression I had previously dismissed. Individually, they were just paper cuts, deniable by design. But listed one after another, they formed a chilling, undeniable pattern. This wasn't a one-time misstep. This was a deep-seated bias. It was terrifying and strangely validating. I wasn't being too sensitive. This was real. Now it was time for the data dive. This was my turf. As a senior analyst in all but name, I had high-level access to departmental data. For years, I had used these tools like an X-ray machine to find broken bones in the business. Now I was going to use that same X-ray machine to find the cancer. I started with promotion rates in our department over the last 5 years. The results were stark and sickening. White employees were promoted on average within 18 months. For employees of color, that average jumped to 42 months. Next, I looked at project allocation. High-profile projects were Tier 1. The routine stuff was Tier 3. The data was damning. Over 80% of Tier 1 projects had been assigned to white team members. Employees of color were mostly given Tier 3 work. It was like we were all on a construction site, but they were being given the blueprints and the power tools, while we were being told to move piles of dirt with a shovel. We were busy, but we weren't building a career, but the most damning data came from hiring records. The numbers told a story that made my blood run cold. Plenty of qualified black and brown candidates applied. A good number made it to the first interview, but the drop-off after that was a statistical catastrophe. The ratio of final round interviews to offers for white candidates was almost 1 to 2. For black candidates, it was 1 to 15. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a kill switch at the final stage, the stage where Mark, as the hiring manager, had the most say. Data can be explained away. I needed the smoking gun. I needed to connect the data to Mark's intent. I started digging through old email chains and found it. This is buried in the notes from a hiring debrief. The top 2 finalists were a black woman with 7 years of experience and a white man with 3 years of experience. The woman's resume was objectively superior, but Mark's notes were the deciding factor. About the black candidate, he wrote, "Extremely competent and knowledgeable, but her style might be a little intense for the team. Could be a disruptive presence. Questionable long-term culture fit." About the white candidate, he wrote, "Great personality, really gelled with the team. Eager to learn. Shows a lot of promise and is someone we can mold." He used coded words, intense, disruptive, which in the corporate world are often like racist dog whistles. audible only to those who are meant to hear them. He was confirming the exact pattern the data showed. He wasn't just a participant in a biased system. He was its primary architect. I saved a secure PDF of that document. I compiled everything, the spreadsheets, the charts, the analysis, my journal, into a single, meticulously organized 30-page dossier. The quiet investigation was over. Now it was time to make some noise. With the dossier finished, a strange, cold calm washed over me. The rage was no longer a wildfire, it was a focused laser. I could have just anonymously emailed the dossier to the entire executive board, but that felt impersonal. I wanted to see Mark's face when his carefully constructed world came crashing down. I wanted to be the one to light the match. So I sent a meeting invitation to Mark, his direct boss, our VP, Sarah, and the head of HR. The subject line was simple: discussion regarding departmental hiring and promotion practices. It was just vague enough to be mandatory. I attached no documents. I wanted them to walk in completely blind. Mark bustled into the conference room a minute late, all smiles. "All right. What's the big mystery? James, you're looking very serious today," he chuckled. I took a deep breath. "Thanks for coming. I asked for this meeting because I've uncovered some deeply concerning patterns in our department that I believe require your immediate attention." The mood in the room flipped like a switch. I connected my laptop to the big screen. The first slide was a brutal bar chart. Average time to promotion. "As you can see," I started, my voice perfectly steady, "there is a significant disparity in career progression. It's like we're on the same racetrack, but employees of color have hurdles on their lanes that white employees don't." I clicked to the next slide, a pie chart showing project allocation. "Furthermore, high-visibility projects are disproportionately assigned to our white team members." Mark started squirming. "Now hold on," he cut in. "That data doesn't tell the whole story. There are nuances." "I agree," I said, cutting him off. I moved to the next slide. "So let's talk about hiring. Here is the pipeline data. We attract a diverse applicant pool, but there is a nearly 90% drop-off rate for black candidates between the first interview and the final offer." The HR director's eyes were wide. Sarah's face was pale. Mark looked like he'd been punched in the gut. "This is a statistical anomaly," he stammered. "It's not intentional." "Isn't there, Mark?" I asked. And now I made it personal. 2 weeks ago, you told me I was being passed over for a promotion because I was too smart and not a culture fit. Mark's face went from red to ghostly white. "I never said that. That's a gross mischaracterization." "Was it career advice you were giving when you wrote these notes?" I clicked to my final devastating slide. There on the screen were his own words from the hiring file. His description of the more qualified black woman as intense. His praise for the less experienced white man as someone they could mold. The room was dead silent. The smoking gun was on the screen. Mark opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. He was cornered, exposed, and utterly defeated by his own words. Sarah, the VP, finally broke the silence. Her voice was pure ice. "Mark, are these your notes?" He couldn't speak. He just stared at the screen, a man watching his career implode in real time. She turned to me. Her face was a mixture of shock and respect. "James, thank you for bringing this to us. The thoroughness of your analysis is commendable and deeply, deeply disturbing." She stood up. "Mark, you and I will be having a conversation in my office. Now." Mark stood up slowly, like a man in a trance, and followed her out. The HR director stayed behind. "Mr. Vance," he said, using my last name for the first time, "we will be launching a full formal investigation. You have my word that you will be protected from any retaliation." I just nodded, packed my laptop, and walked out. It wasn't triumph, not yet. It was the quiet, deep satisfaction of a man who had faced a giant and, using the very tools the giant had belittled, watched him fall. The fallout was swift and decisive. Mark was immediately placed on administrative leave. They brought in an outside law firm, a clear sign they were taking this seriously. My dossier was their roadmap. They interviewed other minority employees, and now that they felt safe, the stories came pouring out. My data was the skeleton. Their stories were the human cost that gave it flesh and blood. 2 weeks later, the memo was circulated. Mark's employment was terminated. He was fired because I brought the receipts. Sarah, the VP, called me into her office again. She apologized, a genuine human apology. "I am sorry," she said. "This happened on my watch. You should never have been put in a position where you had to do our jobs for us just to be treated fairly." Then came the offer. The senior analyst promotion with back pay, plus a new role they created for me. Director of Departmental Strategy and Equity, reporting directly to her. I'd be in charge of overhauling the entire system. It was everything I thought I wanted. Vindication on a silver platter. But I hesitated. The company was only fixing the problem now because I had forced their hand. A fire department that only shows up after you've put out the fire yourself isn't one you can rely on. Could I really be happy here, in the place where I had to fight so hard just to be seen? I realized that winning the battle didn't mean I had to stay to occupy the territory. Around that same time, a recruiter from a major rival company reached out. They were building a new advanced analytics division and wanted a leader. The job was bigger, the pay was better, and most importantly, it was a clean slate. So, I made my decision. I respectfully declined the new director role. I told Sarah I would accept the promotion and the back pay because I had earned it. But I also gave her my 2 weeks' notice. I explained that the trust was fundamentally broken. I did, however, offer to consult for 2 months to help them implement the new systems I had designed. I wanted to leave the place better than I found it, but my own future was elsewhere. She was disappointed, but she understood. On my last day, my colleagues took me to lunch. They thanked me, their gratitude quiet but profound. One of them, a talented Latina data scientist, had just been assigned her first Tier 1 project. Another was being fast-tracked for a team lead role. The change was already happening. I hadn't just saved my own career. I had cracked the door open for others, and that felt better than any promotion ever could. So, where are they now? Well, from what I hear, Mark struggled to find another management job at that level. The tech world is smaller than it looks, and stories travel. He learned the hard way that you can't suppress someone's intelligence without severe consequences. As for me, I took that job at the rival company. I'm now leading a team of brilliant analysts, building something new from the ground up. Here, my boss sees my intelligence as the primary asset for which he hired me. Here, being too smart is just called being good at my job. My story ended well, but it points to a much larger problem. Workplace bias is real and it's insidious. It often hides behind coded language like culture fit or even twisted compliments. It takes an immense amount of courage to confront it. I learned that you often have to be your own champion. You have to be willing to gather your evidence, build your case, and speak truth to power, even if your voice shakes. Because one person with the truth and the data to back it up can be more potent than any biased system. They can be, to borrow Mark's word, a very disruptive presence. And sometimes, disruption is just another word for progress. Thank you for listening to my story. The fight for a truly fair and equitable workplace is happening every single day. If you've ever faced something like this, or if this story hit home for you in any way, please share your thoughts and even your own experiences in the comments below. Your stories matter. They create a community and show others they aren't alone. And if you want to hear more stories of professional revenge and sweet justice, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. You never know whose story you'll hear next.